when you were din, what did Gina, what did G one number? Oma one number no badan adishi. Na yashe obida Rebecca. The corner Rebecca of Fado, ordinary mpono who buffer or risk narrow life. Now one any biara just to ensure that Zanyamia Kafa never Jacob Hono or Bebim. And this was a woman who risked her life, her marriage, her everything to ensure that God's word concerning Jacob would be would come to pass. We also looked at the mother of. We also looked at the mother of Moses, Jochebed, and I mean, actually, Jochebed ni jidza onye na reshima onye no wanyamim na ohun de na bana nyamida manono onye sabi eba kunu biara na mmom oye eba nyame nansa wonodo intino ono so tuanamon. He disobeyed the king's edict and risked her own life and the life of her entire family to preserve Moses. And what did Moses turn out to be? The deliverer of Israel. Inti daman amamifo nyinaa wogina kwen ma hwanamba na hwanamba no bɛyɛ etiti yɛhwɛ obi da Jedida also ogina na ne ba Josiah. Josiah was only 8 years old when he became king. Actually, Josiah narankasa ne papa Ammon. Ammon was a wicked king, and Naso Manasseh, the most wicked king. Into Dama him for Diani, where Josiah Nana papa, and they were the most wicked kings in Israel. And so Ammon nene year oye Jedida. Ammon win out Josiah Beye on him 8 years. And na Jochebed Jedida nara ofa ne bay na otitsin. Inti otitsin mo beye on him papa. And I mean, at the end of the day, the record about Josiah was that there was no king in Israel, nor was there before him, nor was there any king after him who walked in the ways of David and served God. Josiah beye ohenepa Trasem said that ohini biara enyi ho a no di n'enyim anade no di n'ekyir ɔde no ho nyinara to Israel nyamedo na ɔnanso ɛkwan a ɔhen David ba etu hɔ no mu. And it was all because Jedida was a woman, a mother of destiny, who represents nurture and nature. In the Yerisha Hannah, Yeshas the Yerisha Hannah from last week, and we looked at Hannah's struggles, her desperate need, and her distressing rival. Hannah had a need for a child, and what even made her need worse was the fact that her rival gave her no rest, teasing her, mocking her, to the extent that even when they went to Shiloh yearly, there at Shiloh in the temple or at the temple, Hannah's rival, Peninnah, would still tease her. And the Bible says she provoked her until Hannah could handle it no more. And Hannah went through a lot of struggles with Peninnah, with herself, with her need, and all that. But like I said last week, any problem that sends you on your knees, it's a good problem. Or how be bawodo na sadam or how no wan chuen finya meno ho na sadam or how no Oma itreminka konya minifie. Oma ikobu nkotojo bompaya. No oye ohaw papa. Oye ohawa odin zipebiba bro. And that is what we said about Hannah's situation. The struggles she went through pushed her into the temple. Her struggles did not push her away from God. Her struggles did not make her curse God. Rather, her struggles made her go on her knees in the temple and she prayed. We also looked at her supplication, her prayer. We realized that Hannah prayed and cried. And in her, we examined her prayer, how that she called on uh, Jehovah Sabaoth. We looked briefly at the implication of Jehovah Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. Hannah called on the Lord of hosts because she translated her problem into a battle and called on the Lord of hosts, the God who is the captain of the hosts of heaven. And God answered the prayer. Yehun Hannah na pildi a ofem osande na onye nokura wonka na nokura itum otum sina twetwe dama onye bebi a rama na wote no nko na mmom oduko shilopo na odi yinehi wo asordan mpo na Hannah ne kura a oye penina na osina twetwe osono she provoked Hannah. Na Hannah wamane hawa na orufem no antwena dwene mfi nyame ho. Sa ifa ohaw bim na sadam haw no oma eda wachirima nyame na kada onam da amiri yenti nyame mpo nyi ho eda na kyerɛ dam haw no oduru ko osɛm. Na sa ifa ohaw bimu na sadam haw no oma etutu minka konyame ne fie oma ko bunkotodwe oma chinkom na oma ibompaya na kyerɛ oye ohaw papa nyame mo oba wa kwan mu na dam ohaw papa no odinzama pepe bi so de babro isua dam adifi Hannah ho. Na Hannah ne mpaya oboy no ofre osuru dom hen asafu Awurade na Hannah kai. The Lord of hosts, listening Jehovah Sabaoth. Na osande Hannah hunde hawa orfim no oye okun. Na Hannah akọ akono into na wada ofre osuru dom hen safu hen na obedinikan. Na okodur baby po na kyerɛ dɛ ne mpaebɔ no wakɔ aka yɛ dza na no keke na obue nso na nsɛm biara mpo mfi mu mba kesi dɛ Eli po dwen dɛ wanom nsa na dɛ ɔka ho yɛka ne nyinaa no ho asɛm. But today we want to move on from her supplication to her sacrifice. Her struggles, her supplication, and then her sacrifice. In her prayer, Hannah pledged. And she made a vow. Excuse me, I think somebody is around the studio playing some music. Tell them there is a program here. Their music is coming into this studio. Thank you. It's for one French and I think we have an adjacent studio. And you know they're playing the music so loud and that's what you are hearing in the background. It's not from Asempa. Good. So what are we looking at? Her sacrifice. Now Hannah prayed a prayer. And we want to look at that prayer again. Again. In chapter 1 and verse 10, and she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow, and that is the pledge we're talking about. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, specifically a male child. He said, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. In other words, Hannah was implying that I don't even need to nurse the child myself. I don't need a child who will live with me. I just need to prove a point that the Lord hears prayer. So the Lord of hosts, I just need one male child. If you give me this male child, it will prove a point. It will silence my accusers. It will silence those who are provoking me. And even that son, I won't keep him home. I will give that son to you so that for the rest of his life, that son will be yours. It's a promise, oh God, I will sacrifice that son to you. He wouldn't be my son, he would be yours. Just make me a vessel or a channel through whom that son would come. And when that son comes, that son will be yours for the rest of your life. Just help me prove that point. And that was Hannah's prayer. And indeed, Hannah honored that promise. So let's see what happens. Of course, later on, the high priest Eli came in and prophesied over Hannah and said, the Lord grant you the request you have placed before him. And when Hannah went back home, the Bible says the Lord remembered her. I mean, if you remember the prayer, Hannah said, "Oh Lord, if you will indeed look on the affliction, the struggles of your maidservant, and remember me," and that is exactly what God did. And in verse 19, the Bible tells us, and they rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord and returned and came to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. The Lord remembered her. Now, how did the Lord remember her? And it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son. Exactly what Hannah requested for. He said, God, remember me. And the Lord remembered her. And it is like, when you remember me, give me a male child. And the Lord remembered her and gave her a son. And she called his name Samuel or Shemuel. Shemuel means God has heard, or head of God, Shemuel. Because she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. I have asked of him from the Lord, and by implication, the Lord has also heard and granted that which I asked of him. Shemuel or Samuel. So, after she had taken care of Samuel, nurtured that baby, and weaned that baby of breast milk and so on, the child started walking and talking, and Hannah said, now it's time for me to honor the Lord. I pledged, and this is my sacrifice. I'm taking you back to the temple. No, henceforth, you are not mine. You belong to Jehovah. You don't belong here at Ramah. you belong there at Shiloh, and you belong at the temple. And so um, Hannah prepared, carried everything, and sent Samuel to the temple. I want us to read that. I want us to read that briefly. So let's go to First Samuel chapter 1 again, and let's read from verse 24. Now, when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. The child was young. He was a lad. And the Hebrew word, the na'ar, meant that he was a lad, a kid. He was a kid, if you want the American word. He was young. And when Hannah sent him to the temple, she added some other sacrifice: 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, skin of wine, and all that, and carried all this as sacrifice together with Samuel to the house of the Lord. And she brought the child to Eli the priest. Apparently, of course, it took about a year for Hannah to give birth, that's through the pregnancy, and it took about 3 years to nurture the son, and so on. So it was just, after the encounter with Eli, um, one would say at least 4 years had passed, moving to 5 years thereabout. And so Eli had completely forgotten because he had attended to a few other people, and the old man didn't even remember that he prophesied over Hannah. Verse 26 tells us that when Hannah brought the child to Eli, she said, "Oh, my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition, which I asked of him. Therefore, I have also lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord." So they worshipped the Lord there. Of course, that was how um, Hannah fulfilled her pledge and fulfilled her sacrifice. So Hannah, we've seen his struggles, we've seen his supplication, and we've seen his sacrifice. The quality of his sacrifice, we are talking about her only son. The quality of her sacrifice, that's her only son. And this was the son she needed to fight the aggression of her rival. Because at a point, Hannah couldn't even send her rival's children without being reprimanded. She couldn't correct the child, any of the children. They were unruly, but Hannah couldn't correct them because Penina would jump in. Wait till you have your own child. Wait till don't send my child. Don't correct my child. Wait till you have your own child, and then you will see how it is to have a child. Dam ekutiano was born Hannah dama. Inti na nche Hannah here a bakor. Only nemifie hompo as a proof. There sabi onye bonyin. There sabi nyame say na asane shabir. Inti nche de bia no penina ohu n'enyim anu ehu de sana nyame su te mpaibo. Na Hannah wanyendam. ɔsi magyina ahyɛbɔ dɛ sɛ nyame dze ne mama a no nkwa de nyinaa megya no ama nyame. Nti no Hannah dze na ma ɔhwehwɛ nye dɛ nyame mama atamfo mmua hɔn ano. Yɛ biribi na ma m'enyiwa nhu dɛ ɔwɔ Awurade na ɛsesa nyimpa, ɔwɔ Awurade na ɛtie mpaebɔ, na mama atamfo mmua hɔn ano. Na ɔba no dɛm nyame tie, otie mpaebɔ no ara pɛ, ɔhwɛɛ Samuel ma onyi no kakraa dɛ ɔnantew ɔrekasa, ɔse Samuel ɛnyɛ ha na ɛtena, ɛnyɛ maba bio. Medze wo hyɛ bɔ ma nyame na ɔsane dzi no kora. Nti ɔdze no kɔɔ nyame no fie, and she offered him completely for the rest of her life, of his life. He would belong to God and belong to the temple. For the rest of her life, of his life, he would belong to the Lord in the temple. Good. Now, for me, the best part of this whole episode is Hannah's song. Hannah's song. And I just love the song. And you ma Hannah to yeah, you know what? I've written something here. If you don't understand her plight, you will not know her pain. And if you don't know her pain, you will not appreciate her prayer. And if you don't appreciate her prayer, you will not value her praise. Let me say that again. You're talking about Hannah. She sang a song, and we are going to analyze the song. But first, understand this, that if you don't understand her plight, you don't understand what Hannah went through, you wouldn't understand her pain. You wouldn't know her pain. If you don't know her pain, you wouldn't also appreciate her prayer. And if you don't appreciate her prayer, you will not value her praise. Enyuma Hannah towe no yerebahwe na mamerika nyi de se inyim tsibia na Hannah wo ba intumi nsene yawase na se ansene yawase so a intumi nsene mpaebo na ase ina se enhunu ansene mpaebo na ase so a ne nyuma a otuwi na yeyi no obeye bibi gengen wa kaye de obi a wato bicycle wetum ato bicycle na wa ba so dem de no ha boto fom na ore danyame ase awo bo hwe na kada o na bicycle peso. Oh, you don't know where he's coming from, and if you don't know his plight, you wouldn't know his pain. If you don't know his trials, you wouldn't know his testimony. Sa obiri yinyame ayewa ebia na yeyi no botuetue waswa. But if you do not understand that person's plight, you wouldn't understand his prayer. Ebia bebi ofino the way to my bicycle no oye da de kese inyima kwanchi na wache ansana otumi nyanhodin put that bicycle, and you don't judge him. Don't judge him. I think in the 1980s, I traveled to Nigeria for a revival program, and when I was there, the revival program was held outdoors, so it was more like a crusade, and so the first day, the host pastor, as part of the program, called for testimonies. One man came in there, picked the microphone, and started testifying. He was a Ghanaian living in Lagos. I think Yaba, that was where the program was held. And this man gave his testimony. He was in Ghana. You remember during the early 1980s, people who ran to Ghana to Agege, he was one of them. His family, somebody had died in the family, and the family gave him money to come to Accra and buy a coffin. He bolted away with the money to Agege. And for years, for about 5 years, no, about 4 years, they never heard from him. And the family thought he had died. He was all the time living in Agege with a guilty conscience. Maybe the family would curse him, people would do this, and so on, and he was there. And so, one of those days, he passed by this church, heard them preaching, and he went in and gave his life to the Lord. And one of the things he prayed about was for God to help him get a job in Agege so that he would be able to pay back what he had taken from the family unlawfully. He got a job, and within a short time, he became a supervisor with a construction firm. And that was his testimony. And now he started making money. He gathered enough money and decided to come back to Ghana and make amends. He prayed that God would bring him to Ghana and back to Agege safely. Now he came back to Ghana filled with trepidation, fear. He didn't know how the family was going to save him. And so he gathered some money, gathered some provisions, stuff, and so on. When he got to the station, the final station of that village, of course, in our villages, everybody knows everybody. So somebody shouted, "Osimesi abo, abo," and he was scared. So first of all, he walked to the palace, greeted the chief, "Hey, Kendishina Sanaba," then went to the family. And to his amazement, the family received him just like the father of the prodigal son received him. They didn't see anything wrong with what he did. They were just happy to know that he was not dead and he was alive. He presented some items. He wanted to refund the money. They said, "No, we don't need that money. You need it for yourself." So later he had to leave the money and ask them to, he said he wasn't refunding the money, but he was giving them the money so that they would paint the family house and repair a few things, which they accepted to do. Now, the few days that he spent in the village, he was like a king. They celebrated him because they saw that he was dead and now he was alive, just like the prodigal son. So time came for him to return to Agege, and the whole village saw him off. He came back, and that was his testimony. He was in some something like safari suit, cream color. But while he shared his testimony, he added tears. He started crying, sobbing. When he finished, he threw the microphone somewhere and threw himself on the floor. It was a dusty field. He rolled himself from one end to the other. His cream political suit or safari suit was all messed up with dust and tears. And when he did that, he stood up and raised his hands and said, "It is all to your glory, O God." I mean, I was the preacher for the day, and I thought that person had preached my sermon. I couldn't help. I also shed some tears, and the whole atmosphere was charged. Now, somebody wouldn't understand why somebody would throw himself on the floor like that and do things. But only he knew what he had just come through. If you don't understand somebody's plight, you wouldn't understand their pain. And if you don't understand their pain, you wouldn't appreciate their prayer. And if you don't appreciate their prayer, you wouldn't value their praise. I'm saying this because of what Hannah did and what Hannah said. Say Hannah ne hawa say na ye yunusi entase. And if you take her praise to be any other praise, you would miss it. That is why I'm positing her praise in a certain context. Now let's look at her song, her praise. Chapter 2. I love that. And Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. Just that. A hoka kanam poyen sama. My heart rejoices. Nyamia yebi. Ebei na mesre fi nyame ho, nyame etemi, nyame akai me, inti nyame ayebi. My horn is exalted, my strength is restored. Mara suma no na wotum no wa waibio. Inti so wareka musu mekebi. That is the essence of my horn is exalted. My mouth has been widened. My mouth has been unzipped. You may not understand that until you understand Hannah's plight. Otsifieho. Penina ka ontum nkebi. No ri yaw no ontum nkebi. Intina ma Hannah yanyi de obokwa kershedem na wesu. Nukunu kra na ontum no opatana onyeye. Sunday she couldn't talk. Onya bako no nyame say no. If you na ye you know, I say musumano away. Musumim man ben ayed ashama. Matamfuka musume kebi. I smile at my enemies. If you wana na muhuwana na musu muhuwana miye mishishim then chawoba srom na deno in the muhuwana musumutum misrubi. And the printex was a masume shebi. And also marasume kebi. Ika musume kebi. A srua musume srubi. Usande nyami edzimuha fofi. Can you understand that? My heart rejoices. My horn is exalted. I smile at my enemy. Why? Because Jehovah has remembered me. Jehovah has given me a child, a male child, that which I asked of him. And in verse 2 she says, no one is holy like the Lord. There is none holy like the Lord. For there is none besides you, nor is there any rock like our God. And you see, placing this in a context, na Hannah rika asama chiro obi. No rika asama chiro inka se chubi wa inka se chubi wa oya de papa. Inka nka se nyame konwo kuma. No ma esha se de eresrewa. Wama me ni mengwase. Modofo kesi Yesu me ma wammo. Obi to da menyum na ense na ase. Se enyim da wa fema ense na ase. About you then you be like a canora too. Hannah Ose, there is none holy as the Lord. There is none beside thee. Neither is there any rock like our God. There is none holy as the Lord. And when the young dominion lipi, Obiara nsen, penny na ye come wo na wo nsen Obiara yi ho tsen de nyame. Onyim yo kasa kire no. There is none beside him. I'm tempted to get into my Swahili. Swahili, say hakuna Mungu kama wewe. Hakuna Mungu kama wewe. Hakuna mtu kama wewe. Nipe biara enyi ho tsedawo. Obiara enyi ho ye kronkron. Na say neither is there any rock like our God. What are you saying? Obutan biara enyi ho a oteda nyame. Yetwir obutan bi. Na dam obutan no oyempaibo tefu. Yadi hanu ho tunu da yempaba de biara da. And Hannah was singing the song because she knew what the Lord had done. She knew that Jehovah had fought her battle for her. Oman bakol. A bakon, but a man be umpa oye. Eye. Menya dansidi. Oh, na say ye a nabi a yirbi neri tema. Nyamima wa dansidi. Na verse 3 is on Munyo. Hannah says, talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth. Na ye no or catch you be or be a good hear men to talk men talk no more so very proudly. Brefom na nyawan kuna nyame shiraw. Let no arrogance come from your mouth. Mamma akakabinsem biara nhwe no mba. Nyawan kuna nyame shiraw. Hannah couldn't have said this a few years back because Nanano had been zipped. She couldn't have said this, but now she can say it. Talk no more. Who was she referring to? Penina, of course, but somebody anything. Wait on the way you're now you know to. Would be a tin and chen yen tassy, and yet who the cap fits, let them wear it. Penina woha obo who de Nyamibie Hannah no ho afofi. Inti nyum no roto no odeto. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord, He is God of knowledge. He's the God of knowledge, and by Him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, and those who stumbled are girded with strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, and the hungry have ceased to hunger. Even the barren has borne 7, and she who has many children has become feeble. Penina, I will be brain everyone with champua. She said you have become feeble. Now with all your children, you have hired yourself out for bread. Inishi, nyame bubu 1 pen. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. Nyame no see him no to him. And you see, Hannah was not just praising God. She was also making a point. She was also making a point. Look, and for people who brag because of position, People who brag because they have something little, they have some extra change in their pocket. Forget it. There is a God who kills and makes alive. There is a God who brings down to the grave, and there's a God who brings up from the grave. He raises the poor. According to Hannah, he raises the poor from the dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap to set them among princes and to make them inherit the throne of glory. Nyame na opegyaw ehiafo fi datim na opegyaw wafrenden wana wasasade fi sumina do oyi won fi bola do obi a nenche onyi bi na oditi wo bola do no o si nyame tumi yi dem osimesi no odini fi bola do na oma onye mbaponomba sinasi diti. What are you talking about? Destiny belongs to God. Send there in the any baby here. Then you say, I mean from two, and don't look down on others, because the one you are looking down upon, the one you are seeking to trample upon, the one you are seeking to hurt, nyame botum we pegya no. Bra owo aye mirror no, na nyame riya nkase. And what would your testimony be? As for the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and He has set the world upon them. Look, the whole of Hannah Nenyumuno, or your praise and big lessons for people who act like Penina. Now, why am I so excited about this? Because we are hearing the song from a mother of destiny. According to her, it is now her turn to boast. Hannah said, it is my turn to boast. It is my turn. It is my testimony. It is my triumph. And now, it's so beautiful when you look at what happened. So, Mamankan can a honor kakra, and then we'll come back to this. So, let's jump to verse. Yeah, let's look at chapter 2 and verse 18. Chapter 2, verse 18. But Samuel ministered before the Lord, even as a child, wearing the ephod. Of course, as a child, he started ministering, serving the Lord, in the temple. Verse 19, moreover, his mother used to make him little robe and bring it to him year by year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Hannah made sure that in sending Samuel to the temple, Samuel was not going to be a burden to the priest. If it was a sacrifice, he had to be complete sacrifice and wouldn't have to burden the priest with the upkeep. Here, Eli, Medina Chenyame, Nuhu so Mokodara Namafa, Nintana Dobeshi Medeba bread, Maye, Onye Addusia Mount, Mara Maye Ninara, but he still belongs to the Lord. And verse 20 says, and Eli, now, so Hannah Yedama, anytime Hannah, every year as Hannah went there, she did that continually. And Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife Hannah and say to them, the Lord give you descendants from this woman for the loan that was given to the Lord. Then they would go their own way. They would go their way to their own home. Now, Eli continued to prophesy to them, because you have loaned a son to the Lord, may the Lord give you descendants. Inti abako na edina achi Ewurade no, Ewurade nkɔdo na ɔmma mba dodo. Now look at verse 21. That's where we're going to end with our reading. And the Lord visited Hannah. I like that. The first time the Lord remembered Hannah and gave him one child and gave her one child. Now the Lord visited Hannah so that she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. That was Hannah. She prayed, the Lord remembered her. She fulfilled her vow and brought the son to the Lord. And after she had sacrificed the son, offered the son, now God did not just remember her, God visited her. And when God remembered her, he gave her 1. When God visited her, he gave her 5 more. So Hannah ended up as the mother of 6. One who had been described as barren. What are you talking about? That is the God of heaven. And Hannah, the Bible tells us, meanwhile, the child Samuel grew before the Lord. Why do I see Hannah as a mother of destiny? She prayed for a child, and that child became the greatest prophet in Israel. Maybe I can I say, and then Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel had been established as the prophet of the Lord. That was the child that Hannah prayed for. So can you imagine if Hannah had just accepted her fate and stayed and said, well, I'm childless, I will still accept my fate, or I am childless, the Lord is not giving me a child, so I'm turning my back on God, I want to do my own thing, I won't serve God again, and so on. What would have happened to Israel? They wouldn't have had the prophet Samuel. Now, it's important to know that it was Prophet Samuel who was used by God to transit Israel from theocracy to monarchy. It was under Samuel that the people requested for a king and supervised the coronation of a king, King Saul, and all that. Samuel brought revival to Israel. He established the office of the prophet. It was Samuel who started developing the school of the prophets. The school of the prophets was started by Samuel at Ramah, and it's the equivalent of a Bible school. It was Samuel who started it. Later, Elijah, Elisha, and all of them followed suit, heading the various schools of the prophets. Samuel started it. He institutionalized the phenomenon of prophecy, or prophetism. And it was Samuel who introduced the anointing of kings, to the extent that kings started calling him or calling the prophet father. It was all because Samuel led in that. How did all that happen? A mother of destiny took charge, turned her trials into triumph, turned her story around, and became the mother of a son. Oh, that mothers would pray. Look, you have no idea what God has placed in your hands. Ebana nyamedzina mawono inyim za orbadaye. Ebana inye no mempa ba kodara bono hompai, become a mother of destiny and things will turn around. Memira so na when Hannah prayed and pledged, God remembered her and gave her one child. But when Hannah surrendered and sacrificed, God visited her and gave her 5 more children. You can turn your destiny around as you allow your crisis to send you on your knees, just like it happened with Hannah. And she became a mother of destiny. Through her sacrifice and supplication, she gave us Samuel. I pray that the Lord will remember you. I pray that the Lord will visit you and make you a mother of destiny. Let me show you now. Now, on Kayano, the Sunday, or your nipia, you must not babble so do I. What from the Sophogarden? Every Sunday evening, I come your way on Asampa 94.7 FM with Fruitful Family. Let me show him. Now, on board him. No Pinderuque on my young people of destiny. Until let me show him. Barakiwe. Be blessed. I'm out of here. If I dare fra, go to my friend 0553 743 753 0553 743 753. You can call after the program. Yamisha. Amen. With our challenges, with our issues, with our problems, that is good. But David says that